So things like being an outspoken Black woman, young Black woman, in a multicultural church or a multiracial church, where it is, there's a lot of white people. Um, it's white culture. Like the church operates within white culture, and it operates like the Rainbow Nation, and this being in that white culture, I fit in. I think part of the reason I was, besides my overzealousness, as besides being overzealous about being a born again Christian, I think I fit into the white culture because of how I grew up, believing in the Rainbow Nation, believing in the idea that there is a possibility of being equal to white people, or being treated equal to white people. So I fit in. I speak how I speak. So there's also a certain kind of Black person that I think is typically attracted to white-led evangelical megachurches. And I'm very specific to talk to the fact that I went to a white-led evangelical multiracial megachurch in South Africa. And it's very specific. It's very deliberate on my part to say that, because I am locating it within the history of South Africa and what has happened.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B.
Hey guys, and welcome to another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B, aka the elusive pundit. Honey, how are you guys feeling? How you feeling?
I'm very excited to be here with you, Oluchi.
Thank you so
B.
much. Please say the bit.
I love it.
But today we are talking is this your debut book?
No, it's my first single authored book, but it's not my first book.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about power and faith. So I met Pontsho, well, not really meet. I saw her at the UJ Writers Festival like 2 weeks back, as I was working on the essay for April around Christianity. When I saw you on stage, I was like, she's the one! And I'm so grateful to God that she's here today. We're going to be speaking about her book, what power and faith means in society today. So, Queen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm just happy you're here. So do you mind just introducing yourself to the audience?
So I'm Pontsho Pilane. I'm a former journalist. I'm a writer. I call myself a feminist writer. I'm a baby academic. I'm studying towards my PhD. I do many things. I'm very multi-hyphenated. But I think at the core of all the work that I do is writing, and it is contextualizing our histories, contextualizing our present times within future histories as well. So that's how I like to describe myself.
So you fall part of the nerd family. So I was like, I have like my nerd family of people who are interested in academic. And then my role is just to get the information and give it to the people in a way that's like digestible to them. So great job, by the way, writing this book.
Thank you.
I think this is like literally the first book that I know. I don't know if in your research you have other books that's written about the role of church in the Black society. What inspired you to write this book?
So I think under your note about the book, part of the reason of what inspired me to write the book was that I was reading a lot of American, UK-based literature that does the sociological analytics and analyzing of church, religion, faith within society. And I had been doing it for years, for about 10 years, and I would never find South African sources that also have a Black woman perspective, a perspective of a millennial or a young person who grew up in post-apartheid South Africa. And so that's really what inspired the book. But I didn't know I was going to write this book. What happened was I got approached by my publisher, the amazing Mbali Kakane, who works at Tafelberg and me publishes.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want a book out of you. What do you want to write about? And I was like, and I had been approached before by other publishers to write books. As I said, I'm a former journalist, focused a lot on health and gender. And everyone wanted me to write a book about gender-based violence, about health. And even though those are things that are very important to me that I like, I didn't want to write that book. Like, it never felt right. And so when Mbali approached me, it was during my deconstruction out of Christianity. And I was, in that day that I got the message, I was thinking about these things. I was journaling about them, and I was like, I know exactly what I want to write. I want to write, I said, about my former church, which I call the family in the book. So if you hear us saying the family, that's what
I actually was like, I couldn't, like, I was telling you, like, literally when we finished speaking at like around 11, 12 yesterday, I had bought the book like last week, and I was still finishing the essay for, which is the first episode. And I was like, oh, taking my time. And I was like, I'll read Pontsho's book over the weekend. And then you're like, yeah, girl, I ain't got time, honey. I'm available tomorrow. You better push through. And then I was like, literally like reading the book the whole day. And I kept thinking, is the family like a pseudonym that you used in replacement of the real
name?
And I was like, is it his people? Is
for
it
legal reasons, we shall not
is
name said
like,
church.
Oh, is it the Assemblies of God? Who is it? Is it Major What? Is it Bora?
So for legal
I
reasons,
definitely do understand.
For legal reasons, the church is known to litigate against people who speak negatively or in ways that they don't like.
As they should.
I'm not quite sure about using the legal system to stifle freedom of speech, but
that's true.
So I call it the family, and the reason, you know, as I explain in my introductory chapter, is because the family is like the family as in our family, our parents, our siblings, that family structure is the first place where we are socialized. It's the first place where we learn about hierarchy. It's the first place where we learn that if you do not oblige and conform by the norms, standards, values, and systems of this particular place, that you will be chastised or there will be a consequence. And so I saw so many similarities between my own struggle with lack of conforming within my family unit with just the structure, and how it also just became a place for me to abandon my family for the family.
Okay. So you do speak about the fact that you were approached by the publisher Mbali, we love Baludov. And it was around the time you were deconstructing yourself away from Christianity. And in your book, you do speak about that climax period where you were going through emotional and mental turmoil. Do you care to take us through that time period, like literally maybe a year before you left the church? What was happening in and around you?
So I would say I left the church in 2015. I emotionally detached from the church in 2015. I was still going to church. I was still hosting my home cells. But towards the end of 2015, that's where I completely kind of extricated myself. So 2015 was a very hard year for me. I'm somebody who lives with mental health issues. And I had a mental breakdown in 2015. And after, I think, probably my second or third suicide attempt in my life, I ended up in a mental health hospital. A few months, it was June of 2015, I ended up in a mental health hospital. And it was the first time in a very long time, in many years really, where I wasn't going to church every Sunday, hosting home cell, going to choir practice and all of that, and where I had to deal with myself and confront the issues that I had, and actually get the help that I desperately needed and didn't know I needed. Because, you know, the thing about it, and I don't want us to like derail into but like suicidal ideation is not a normal state to be in. And I had to accept that was the state I was in, and work towards coming out of it. So for the first time, I got treated for my mental health conditions. I got onto antidepressants and anxiety medication for the first time. And I still remember that day, like, obviously it didn't happen over a day, but like I remember the day where for the first time my mind, like, there was a calm that I had never experienced in that month that I was in the mental health facility. I remember a specific day, maybe a week or two in, where I had a calm that I had never experienced before.
In the mental health facility?
Yes.
Okay.
And like, obviously reflecting, looking back in my journals and reflecting also with my psychiatrist and psychologist at the time, it was part of the journey to healing. Really, it was me, the confrontation of my issues, me dealing with my traumas.
Yeah.
And it was that feeling was the feeling that I had been chasing in church and never got.
I wanted to get into that. I have like a similar experience. I know we're not going to get too deep into the mental health, but I think it is very important because you do talk about the fact that later on we're going to get into that a lot of the people that actually do subscribe to religion are people that were found in vulnerable and destitute situations, and that's what leads them to the church.
I jokingly always say, no one gets saved on a good day. Like, I'm sorry, like, I'm yet to meet somebody who said they were having the best day of their life, or the best week, or the best year, or the best month, or they were in a happy, content, peaceful place, and they walked to an altar call in church. The day I find that person, I would want to just read their minds forever. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but the vulnerability
it plays a lot.
Plays a lot in how we get saved. What, as the pastors are standing there and talking about, the many threats that are they in the altar call themselves. Things like, if you were to die today, do you know where you would go? And the slowing down of the music, the engineering and the manufacturing of the atmosphere within the church. No one moves out, everyone is standing still, heads bowed. That is part of the engineering of a space that enables people to walk the altar.
Exactly.
And so it is through my deconstruction, right, that I was able to look at these things, reading other authors' work that have been done, like there are PhD theses that have been done on why, for instance, Hillsong music, like the specific technological and scientific ways in which the music works.
You definitely
on
do
people and emotion, right? The controlling of the climate within the church, that in some churches, in many mega churches, the temperature is lowered just before altar call to induce chills on your body during that moment when the piano is playing, when the saxophone, when the drums are sizzling in the background. The voices of the actual pastors changes as the sermon also reaches a certain climate. But I could go on about
the psychology. Okay, so you grew up in the church, and then blah blah blah, and then you went back to the church and got saved at 19, and then continued to be in the church up until 25, which is the time you found yourself in a mental institution because you had suicidal ideations. And then in this mental institution is exactly where you found peace. And there was no church and no God around that time. It was just you as you existed. How did that feel like, knowing that you can get to a place that you've always dreamed of and only to find it in your most unexpected hour?
It was scary. Right? It was, because I think it was the first time again I wasn't praying. So I was getting better, but I wasn't asking God, or praying to get better. So it was terrifying. I mean, I was there for a month, and I was discharged on a Saturday afternoon. And the first place I went on Sunday was church.
You do write about that, and I was like stressed out because I was like, you say you have all of these responsibility, and then you find a little bit of peace. and then you still go to the church. So again, we will understand that was like that indoctrination that we're going to get to later on. I was looking for like a dramatic exit.
No,
I really was
I
looking for a
didn't have one.
dramatic exit. I thought she was like, it was like in the church, and then the pastor was in the podium, and then you were sitting there as the church leader, and all of a sudden it came to you, and you were like, oh,
I can't do this.
F you,
No.
F you, I'm out. Peace.
I felt
How was like, when was it like, this is the last straw?
The
'Cause I
last
was
straw
like,
came
is there
after
gonna
I
be
left. So I went
drama?
back, even after that piece, I didn't understand it,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is retrospectively thinking about it,
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's almost 10, I mean, this year is 10 years
Oh
since
my
I
God.
actually
Time
left and had
flies.
that breakdown.
Time flies.
Time is nothing. Even before my breakdown, there was an uneasiness that I
Yeah.
had about certain things in the church. I think even before I knew about feminism and feminist values, I
Yeah.
was feminist.
Yeah.
So things like being an outspoken Black woman,
Yeah.
young Black woman, in a multicultural church or a multiracial church, where it is, there's a lot of white people.
Yeah.
It's white culture.
Yes.
Like, the church
Yes.
operates within white culture, and it operates like the Rainbow Nation. And this is why I also take my history as a kid born, the year Nelson Mandela
Yep.
came out of prison,
Exactly. Exactly.
as something, because I think these things are all so interconnectedness.
True.
So we're socialized. There's a certain way born frees, even though I'm not technically a born free. I have a Buputatswana birth certificate. Even though I'm not a born free, I was born around that time of freedom,
Yes.
right? And there's a certain way that we were socialized, right? I was the first of all 4 kids, and I'm the last to go to an English medium school, a multiracial school, a school that I found out, was started by the Catholic Church. All my other siblings went to schools within the Botswana Bantustan.
Yeah.
And they learned in Setswana.
What would modern day Botswana be? Like, what do we call it like in
It's
present
Northwest,
day?
essentially.
Oh, because
yes.
it was like, and then I was like, now do I have to go find the Transvaal
It's
map?
like Transkei, Ciskei, and all of that. It was the Bantustans that were created by the apartheid government as a part of the separate but equal kind of homelands legislation, which was at the bedrock of, or one of the bedrocks of apartheid. And so, being in that white culture, I fit in. I think part of the reason I was, besides my overzealousness, besides being overzealous about being a born again Christian, I think I fit into the white culture because of how I grew up, believing in the Rainbow Nation, believing in the idea that there is a possibility of being equal to white people, or being treated equal to white people. So I fit in. I speak how I speak.
Yes.
So there's also a certain kind of Black person that I think is typically attracted to white-led evangelical megachurches. And I'm very specific to talk to the fact that I went to a white-led evangelical multiracial megachurch in South Africa.
That. You definitely
and it's very specific. It's very deliberate on my part to say that, because I am locating it within the history of South Africa and what is happening. You must also understand, 2015, I went into the mental health facility in July of 2015. 4 months later, Fees Must Fall happened. 3 months before that, or 2 months before that, Rhodes Must Fall happened. The incident at UCT, the throwing of the feces on the Cecil John Rhodes statue happened. So I was the historical moment in which my breakdown happened. The historical moment that was happening amongst young born free South Africans through the Must Fall movement. Open Stellenbosch documentary had just come out as well, Leicester, the Leicester documentary that motivated Open Stellenbosch. So there was Transform Wits was happening, which is I was here in Johannesburg at Wits. So there was a moment in all this reckoning that was happening that is what led me to leave, really. It was my radicalization into understanding the failure of the Rainbow Nation project.
Clarkett, let's definitely keep it there for now, because I want to then go into your childhood. So you start the book about the Rainbow Nation, and I mean, I like Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and the only disdain I had around the initialization of the Rainbow Nation was only centered around the fact that they were forcing Winnie Madikizela Mandela to admit to things that she didn't do. And for me, my dislike about the TRC started there. I didn't put any connection with religion, any connection with people being indoctrinated into a new society, into the understanding that what the TRC was in essence saying was that, oh, forget the fact that we killed your parents, forget the fact that we took your land, forget the fact that we took your dignity, forget everything. Let's forgive, let's create this Rainbow Nation, and then let's move forward. How did you make that connection? I was like, oh my God. Because you do see it, like in your mind, you see it. You see Desmond Tutu with the purple. You see all these church leaders. You do see the TRC. You do see what's going on about the fact that we're going here to absolve people from these atrocities. And then we're going out on the other side as like happy, clappy people.
Yeah, I mean, the connection around the religiosity of the TRC is not, I didn't come up with it, right?
Okay.
Yeah, like it has been studied deeply by many scholars before me. And it was in my own kind of digging into histories before even this book was an idea, where I started reading the literature on how the TRC was really created as a space for repentance, and that reconciliation was favored over, reparations and accountability to a certain degree, right? And so for me, I then read years ago, before this book was even, I think I was still in the church even when I read one of Desmond Tutu's books, where I learned about how the Rainbow Nation was coined, right? Using the covenant of God and Noah. Right?
I didn't even know this information.
After the floods.
Yeah.
Noah's Ark. So I think many of us know the floods happened, but we don't know the covenant that was made. And I heard that in church as well. And when I was in church reading that book, I was struck.
Yeah.
It was an uneasy feeling. It wasn't a revelation. It was just like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
That, my existence, or the existence of me and my peers, is basically being compared to this covenant. But at what cost to us?
Exactly.
I think that was the question I was unknowingly asking at that time. And so when you look into the history of the TRC, when you look at the history of this country, you see the religious ideology threaded in between everyday, big, small, medium-sized experiences of what is now South Africa.
Exactly.
And so I thought it would be important to make that connection, considering that I'm also talking about a specific kind of church again, that promotes the Rainbow Nation in a specific way as well.
Clarkett.
And why that specification matters to upholding white supremacy, to upholding patriarchy, but to upholding silence, to upholding the fear of speaking out, to swallowing your pain, swallowing your doubt, swallowing your confusion as well, is something that I thought was important to connect for the reader. And so when I look back, or when I was reflecting, for me, it felt the same way. You know, I was in this amazing church with an amazing building project happening. 120, I will never forget this price. 120 million rand cash building that was being built in Pretoria. I was using my bursary scholarship money to contribute to the building project, you know, and just seeing which kinds of Black people were able to or were seen as better. And you know, I know the answer from Christians is that the church is a hospital, you know, that where people ruin the church and not the other way around. And so like this idea that if there were hierarchies within the church, those hierarchies were created by people and not by the Bible or by religion or faith itself.
Yeah.
But I think it's both.
Exactly.
You know, I would argue that it's both. And so it was starting to see the class differences, which kinds of Black people were more listened to in the church. That we would maybe have one Nguni Sotho song in the service. There was a Black service. So the morning service was an English service. The evening service was English. And then at 11 o'clock, when it is the service with the least amount of people, is the Black service.
Yeah. Let's take it back to the top then, because now we are getting deep into the entrenchment of racism in the church, which is the foundation that was built by the Rainbow Nation, centered around silencing and secrecy and just moving on without actually looking at the damage that's being caused.
Yes, I think silencing is the right word, and swallowing a lot.
Yeah.
You know, for sacrificing yourself at the altar of the Rainbow Nation, for the greater good.
Yeah.
But what I, you know, as a 24-year-old, as a 23-year-old, was starting to see was that, no, wait a minute. The swallowing and the sacrificing at the altar is happening to Black people.
And
it's
Black
happening
people only.
to women.
Yeah.
Women are the ones who have to do these things.
Exactly.
Not the men. It's the Black people in the church that need, you know, to be okay with the pastor talking about serving in the apartheid SADF. We have to listen to that.
I saw that on your book. You better get your book. I'm not going to give you guys no tea. You guys are going to get no tea. This book is full of tea, by the way. That
so, you know, it's things like that we have. Like I was like, I have to be fine with listening to the person who is supposedly my spiritual, as they say again, because why the family metaphor, spiritual father.
Yeah.
Or spiritual mentor, or father, really, because that's what we call it,
exactly.
or what that's what they. I'm not part of that anymore. You know, talking about that he walked with Jesus while wearing the army uniform of an apartheid government
and killing folks.
We don't know, right?
Allegedly.
I don't know that. I don't know exactly what happened when he was there.
This is the Angola War, by the way. If you like history, you will know what this means for South Africa.
Yeah. So it was just, and that was, I think, the first deep discomfort I had in the church. To be like, you know, I grew up in both my parents are quite, they're not political in the sense of political parties, but my parents talk about, especially my dad, talk about politics a lot. So having conversations about politics while watching TV was normal. So I knew a lot about our history, even though I was indoctrinated within the Rainbow Nation. So that was just like weird.
Yeah.
And not okay. It was not weird. It was unsettling. It was unsettling.
Definitely. When I was reading your book, I was like, this gives me corporate South Africa vibes. This is giving me corporate South Africa vibes. Like literally, like down to the core. We're not addressing anything. We're here to make sure that this exists, but the people who are benefiting are these people, but we're not going to talk about it. Which then going back to that Rainbow Nation and people wanting change, because apartheid was not easy. Apartheid was not easy. And then you had like these black people like yourself who were sold into this Rainbow Nation dream, who wanted to be in these spaces where it looked like everybody was equal. And then you go into these spaces, same as me, dummity dumb with corporate, thinking that, hello, oh, my hard work will get me in and it will sustain me. But no, you have to do a lot of moving over the lines to make sure you're not stepping on toes. And these are racial tones.
Yeah.
Never anything outside of just racial boundaries. You can get ahead, but we're not going to let you get that far without ensuring that you do know that you're ultimately a black person in South Africa.
Absolutely right, Oluchi. As you're talking just about that the corporatization of mega churches, especially, just to segue a bit, one of the things that I had to really question myself about in my deconstruction out of Christianity was, why did I choose to go to a white-led evangelical mega church? Ask, why didn't I go to
the ZCC?
Let's talk evangelical churches, born again churches. Why didn't I go to
ZCC
culturally...
doesn't fall under born again.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't it fall under evangelical churches?
No, it's a traditional. It's a traditional, or what they call mainline. They call it a mainline.
They call it mainline.
Or they call them AIC. Why do I remember the acronym? And African Initiated Churches. Okay. AIC. So what African Initiated Churches are essentially churches, obviously, that are Christian, but they have an ethos of Africanness in them. So ZCC is one of the biggest African initiated churches in the world, really. So that is why, for me, it was important to also just locate that. I don't think, had I not been a Rainbow Nation project, would I have found myself in a white evangelical church. I actually did not like, as you were saying, not to give away more of the book, but the first time I got saved was when I was 13. I didn't even know what I was doing. It was in a black evangelical church, right? And I always had, because of my own family's suspicions around evangelical churches, the churches studied then and like because they were outside of the norm of mainline churches and more traditional churches, the skepticism was always there. But part of the reason then white evangelical church resonated with me was because of its corporatization. You're in church for 90 minutes. Do you know how amazing that is?
Oh, okay.
You know how efficient that is? You walk in, there's a greeter. Like, it works like a machine. It's a well-oiled machine, right? And for me, maybe because of my personality and just personally me, but I know many people also relate to this, that was impressive.
Yeah.
And think about it also in the context of the emerging black middle class, right? Being able to be in a corporatized space like that with our aspirations to whiteness, with our aspirations to middle classness, with our aspirations for a white cultured life.
Yeah.
That is what makes these churches also attractive to a certain kind of black person as compared to another. So the corporatization of the church is part of why it is successful. These churches operate this way because it's like starting a business. There is a formula, and a formula that works, and they have been able to replicate it. And I know this because I have seen other churches operate in this way as well.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because I wanted us to bring that up heavily, because I feel like it's the same thing that corporate does. I can only speak from corporate. The fact that they sell you this dream and you really want to buy into this dream because it's a level up from where you are, and you want to believe that black, white, colored, Indian can all work together. And I mean, you go to the office 9 to 5, it looks like it's working, but if you look deeply, it's not working. It's just a facade, which is the same thing. It's like people are aspiring to be better than the generation before. And for Black people who are in colonized state, that always ultimately means assimilating to white culture.
Yes, and to a certain extent, I also just believe it was a moment that we found ourselves in historically as South Africa because of the transition into post-apartheid South Africa into democracy.
Yeah.
But it was also it's also a global historical contextualization of capitalism.
Yep,
And
yep, 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 yep.
whether we're talking about the American dream,
Yeah.
you can see this manifest in other places as well outside of South Africa in the same way where um, the aspiration to whiteness is a signifier of success.
True. That is very true.
Yeah.
That is very true. Okay, so we spoke about how church was also used to fight anti-apartheid, and then you do also speak about the fact that even the apartheid government was using the church to push their own propaganda. Africans.
Yes.
Just brief.
Okay, so as I was going into the archives, I found out how the first I'm sure everyone knows TVN. It's a channel on DSTV now. It originates from the US. It's founded by conservative evangelicals in the US. And it was through the apartheid system setting it up in Ciskei and then later on via radio in Bophuthatswana, how evangelical messaging started and was transmitted to South Africans locally. And so just going into deep into the archives, looking at the connections between apartheid South Africa, the white evangelical right wing conservative players in the US,
White
and
evangelical right wing. Please remember that because we're going to get into that later.
And how they were all, there was there was collusion to ensure apartheid continues, to whitewash apartheid to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
There were trips done by right-wing evangelical leaders to South Africa.
I know Kenneth
sponsored,
Copeland.
sponsored
You
by
do
the
spoke about him.
apartheid
Yeah.
government, where they came here to label anti-apartheid, the ANC, the Reverend French Chicanes as communists.
Didn't they use the T word as well, call them terrorists?
At some point that also happened. So again, you see the roots of white supremacy right there in the establishment of evangelicalism that is resonating or that resembles that of what we see in the US from even the early 50s, the early 70s, happening in South Africa. And again, this is important because when you think about when the moral majority was formed in the US, which is the conservative evangelical people who came together to give Ronald Reagan the White House in the US through an evangelical vote, essentially. So you see as the politicization was happening in the US, the seeds were being sown already in South Africa during apartheid.
Amen.
And this is why the title of my book is Power and Faith: How Evangelical Churches Are Quietly Shaping Our Democracy. I show it can be tedious to read through this, but I think
it's not. I finished the book in like a day. I sat down and finished it. I swear to God, I was like, because this is like, I like reading books where I'm getting information that I didn't think about. I was like, oh my God, this is good. Easy read. This is an easy read. So don't be like it's too tedious. Okay. Please.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get to it now. Evangelical churches, the family. You speak a lot about how it is corporatized. You speak a lot about the racism. So I've made a list of the things that I want to touch on that you can speak to us about. Firstly, the first thing I want to talk about is the trauma bonding tactics via the family structure.
Yeah, I think trauma bonding exists a lot in the church. And I also think it's a way to extract information about your life from you.
Yeah.
It's intelligence gathering more than anything else.
Exactly.
So maybe it comes across as trauma bonding, but it's also intelligence gathering. They want to figure out who you are.
I remember I was trying to figure out if it's possibly the same church I went to. I'll check my Facebook after that. But me and my former friend, she was a friend at the time, we went to a church around Wits, and it was one of these churches. And then after the church, obviously the girlies just like flock on you and ask you to fill this form with your details and tell them all your problems. And then they invite you to church, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, hello, this is intel. Obviously they can see how you traumatize, where you're vulnerable, and they can then use that to their own advantage.
Absolutely. And again, with the facade of helping,
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest things, and this is not just specific to evangelical churches, but to the the political powerhouse that the church can be is through social services.
yeah,
We think, even historically, thinking about outside of evangelical church, just thinking about Christianity as a whole, how a lot of missionary work worked, right? It was about bringing social services to uncivilized people. And so the same tactics are still being used today. In fact, a couple of maybe weeks ago, from time to time I listen to sermons from
the senior pastor.
the senior pastor, which is the senior pastor said on the pulpit live in church that he tells their mission work division, where they do their charity work in the church, that they do not give up food if they're not preaching the gospel of Jesus as an instruction. And I was shocked but not surprised. It was just like, I was like, it's so great to hear someone admit it.
Exactly.
Like that's what I was so happy about. But and this helping and the social services work that is often attached to churches, sometimes, not all churches, of course, but many churches, is political. Is not it's not out of the goodness of the heart. There is an ideological maneuvering that is happening for the sake of a bigger Christian agenda and ideology.
Okay, thank you. Another thing I really wanted to emphasize around the trauma bonding tactics is the thing you called them fashioning their church according to the family structure, where there's like hierarchy. You have spiritual fathers, you have spiritual mothers, which then makes it very difficult for you to distinguish between a real family and like a church family.
Yeah. I say that I left my family for the family. Because of, again, going back to vulnerabilities and just not, like my own family dynamics not being great. For me, I gave myself to the church, and that became my family. So I would consider the church more than I consider anything else in my life. And that is also part of how they, lure you in and keep you there, because there were sermons about how you can, your spiritual family is more important because the spirit matters more than
flesh.
They were what can I say? Covert. Yes, there were covert ways in which I've been advised to disregard what my family was saying, like my actual biological family, and the decisions. Because I was a child. I was 19. I was 20. I was still under my parents' care.
True.
To a certain extent. To disregard them before with and spiritual reasons would be given, that now that you're born again, this matters more. Or sermons about how there are people within the stories and parables in the Bible where people left their church, their families, to choose God. And so those subtle messages are there. And that's part of detaching you from a base that's outside of the church.
Yeah, that's true.
For control.
Yeah, and you did say that no one's gone to church on a happy day. Everybody always go to church because they're destitute, they're desperate.
No one gets saved on a happy
Saved.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
You
that's
can
true.
go to church in a happy mood, but like
No one, yeah.
salvation is something else. Yeah.
And then obviously because they use the vulnerability and then they use your condition, which is obviously dire, which is why you are wanting to be saved. And then that leads to some abuse tactics. You do speak extensively about the abuse in hierarchy in the church.
Yeah. So when I speak about Pastor Thabo, I was talking to somebody who is also a former member of the family who was like, yeah, but maybe he's rogue within the church. I was like, if he was rogue, he would have been expelled at this point, because my complaint, I talked about this. I didn't keep the things that he did, and then I found out he did even worse things. He'd ask for people's pay slips, to make sure that they're tithing, and for me, people defend the church by saying, but like, he's doing that. Not all the pastors do that. And I was like, but he's doing that in the church, and
within
no one,
an institution.
and he has only been promoted.
Exactly.
From where he was when I was there and where he is now, he's been promoted. He's been given, which means the church.
What? Again, when I was reading this book, I was like, clearly corporate.
So he's fine. If the church is not like this, why is he still thriving within the system?
True as hell. And then we go into the brainwashing tactics around the essence of the church itself. So you're gonna go to hell if you don't do this. We're gonna excommunicate you as a member if you don't conform, and those type of things. Are there any other brainwashing tactics that you wanna speak about?
Yes. So like the continuous trying to be perfect, and trying to be as good as possible. So you are now stuck within a cycle of not feeling good enough, or even like, just think about the songs. Like I sometimes think about the songs we used to sing, I'm not worthy, all of you, less of me, more of you, like things that strip you out of yourself,
your human identity, essence.
And obviously then the thing that's being said is Jesus, God, but in an institution, for the institution, in the name of the institution, for the sake of the flourishing of the institution. And this is also connected to dominion theology, which I talk about, which is this idea of making disciples of all nations, getting people saved, recruitment, right? For a lack of a better word. And the more people, on surface level, what it means is you're helping people get to God. But if we critically think about this, it is like you are collecting Pokemons, for a lack of a better metaphor.
Oh, yes.
In this recruitment process.
Okay. And you do this. It's like a sales thing where you have to go and make target all the time. You have 100 souls to save. And the crazy thing about the brainwashing is, why can't I just go alone? Which is something that your sister actually raised earlier on when you were around 12, when you were asking her why she left the evangelical church that she used to go to. And she was like, I don't, like, literally, why do I have to save other people? I think saving myself should be enough.
Yeah, but also because, listen to that. How doesn't that sound weird? Saving yourself isn't. You're already positioned as selfish to not want, because the ideology of dominion theology and of born again Christianity has positioned people as, if you say this has saved you and you don't want to take the good news to everyone else, if you don't want to make disciples of all nations, then you're being selfish.
Oh, wow. Okay, I don't want to go any further into this discussion.
So there's no winning without rejecting it, because you can't say, I just want to save myself. That's selfish. If you
That's
have
what
been,
I think
if
about myself.
you have been saved, then you should want the same salvation for others. And that's how they get you into this recruitment cycle.
And you also talk about patriarchy in the church as well, in terms of the dress, protect the man from feeling,
from sinning,
from
protect the brothers. Yeah, so I talk about patriarchy within the church and how it specifically wants women to control women in certain ways, from a dress code to now being responsible for the sexual morality of men.
Yep.
How that promotes rape culture. How it promotes purity culture, where there is, the idea of sexual morality is more, the pressure for that is put more on women than on men.
Yeah.
And how that, even when you think about white led mega churches, the image that will come up is of a white buff man. It's not by coincidence.
Yeah, that's true. Racism in the church.
Yeah. So the thing about like this idea of non-racialism within multicultural churches is that it depends on the erasure of blackness. It requires the erasure of white violence, and it requires
Same as TRC.
Yeah, it requires the complicity of black aspiration to whiteness.
Yep. Okay, and then I want to quickly just speak about the business and corporatization of the church using the same tactic as the multi-level marketing scheme, which is the same that Avon uses, which is the same that Tupperware uses, and then how that feeds into like the sales model of you guys having to go around looking
planting
for these people,
churches, planting home cells, yeah,
exactly.
No.
And then lastly, then get into how that's slavery, because a lot of the work that you guys have to do, you don't get paid for.
So I was a full-time student at Wits, spending 5 to 6 days a week working for the church.
Yeah.
That is,
and you did break it down.
Unpaid labor. It's crazy.
You did break it down. I was like, what? Even on Saturday, you can't chill.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then one thing, as I was looking through my archives and the emails and all this work that I was doing for the church, and I don't remember which book I was reading at the same time. That was I had covered a story. I was trying to do a story on Herbalife at the time, and I was reading up on multi-level marketing, and I then saw, and the picture is in the book, right? This is literally what a structure of Herbalife,
I hope you guys can see it. I'll also
multi-level marketing looks like.
It's a multi-level. This is giving me this other company I used to work for. I also speak negatively about them in my books. I won't say that steep hierarchy structure. Steep. You want to get to the top, but there's so many
It's literally
levels.
a pyramid scheme.
It's a pyramid scheme.
And like, I just remember like the aha moment of, oh, snap. And this is literally the structure that was in the church.
Yeah.
And
you were sitting at the top before you.
Is that overseer? Yeah.
Yes, you were sitting at the top.
Yeah, when I left, yeah.
So the business model is multi-level marketing, hierarchy, you recruit, and then it's sort of like a sales thing. You get one person in, and then you get indoctrinated to believe that you can't just save yourself alone. You have to save other people, which is then.
And so then you have all these people, like after Sunday church, after Sunday service, you get a list from your regional pastor or whatever of the people that got saved that you need to make sure are back in church, get planted in a home cell. So while they're still fresh and raw, right, from getting saved. And like, you're working, and I was writing reports. Like, I was mid-level manager.
You did say, but Queen, I'm just happy you were saying that at least it helped you with your corporate career. Because on your job interviews, you could be like, "Hello, I've been a slave."
Like, but I was a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
Like early 20s. I was a child.
You were a child.
I was a child. I didn't need to be doing all of that. And I was doing, and everyone was doing it on a voluntary basis.
Yeah, which is why
only the
I say
pastor
slavery.
and maybe the assistant would get would be, so these churches
Compensated.
run on free labor.
And how do they define the slavery? They're saying that you
Serving.
need to
It's serving.
use as a
Your gifts.
service.
It's your gifts. Yeah, you're using your gifts for the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
So it's not, you are not volunteering. It's not even called volunteering, because
Yeah.
I think volunteering even gives that atmosphere that you are doing it voluntarily.
Yeah.
But this is, you have to serve the kingdom of God with the gifts that have been bestowed on you by God. So you are giving what you are giving God what belongs to Him anyway.
Oh wow, amen. Hold on. So are you telling me everybody that works? I think the last mega church I went to was Hillsong outside of Century City in Cape Town, because I'm always there. And I was just like bored. I was like, okay, let me find an activity to do. I was like, oh, let me just go to church. So I went there. So are you telling me all those people, like from the people that usher you into the church,
Most of them
the
are
people that are
volunteers.
playing keyboards, the people that harass you to join, the people that call you, the people that do the background, the admin, the AV, everybody, nobody's getting paid?
No, there are some people who are employed by the church, but the majority of the people who make the service happen are volunteers.
Slavery is a choice. Kanye West did give us this information.
I promise you. And I'm talking, and it wasn't just at a student level, like people who were higher ups in their work at work were sweeping the church, which, when you think about it in society, it looks like a noble thing to do. And I do believe people are doing it out of nobility to a certain level, to a certain extent, right? But it's free labor. Very few people, churches do employ people, but most mega churches work because people are volunteering and are doing it for free in the name of God.
I just wanted to speak about a term that I saw for the first time in your book, Christian supremacy. And you give us this example about the fact that you don't think about it, you don't see it, but Christian supremacy is everywhere. From the fact that if you go to school in assembly, you had to say a Christian song, and then you had to pray, starting meetings, thanking God in meetings, and to public holidays. I mean, I don't want to complain about the Easter holiday, darling. I want it. But that means that the Christian religion is sort of like a supremacy.
Yeah, and it's normalized within society to a point where, Christian supremacy, just like white supremacy, is essentially that something has become so banal and so normalized in society that it is not even seen, it's seen as normal.
Yeah.
It really, and I talk about Christian supremacy to say so many things that are actually, when you look at their origin, are actually Christian culture, have just become normalized in society and have become part of everybody's culture.
Okay.
And the manifestation of Christian supremacy happens across board, from even laws, and I just wanted to share this idea to readers about the proliferation of religion, but especially Christianity.
Yeah.
And that it is not normal, that it has been so secularized.
We forget that it's a religion.
Yes.
Church supremacy, Christian supremacy, and all of these supremacies make us believe that Christianity is the be all and end all. And if you don't subscribe to Christianity, there's something fundamentally wrong with you.
Yeah.
And you don't deserve to have a normal life. You don't deserve to live. They don't stop at you just going to hell. They bring the hell to you right now, today.
Yeah. You're punished or ostracized for not abiding by the Christian norm in society.
Even for non-Christians.
Yes.
Even for non-Christians, because you do make an example about that Red Bull ad,
yeah,
which I didn't think was offensive.
I mean, I was a kid.
and then you make a reference to the halal buns.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just cross buns. It's just cross buns.
And how Christian supremacy, because Christians think that hot cross buns, bread, literally bread, yeast in water and flour belongs to them to a certain extent that they have tried to boycott they tried to boycott Woolworths over
Yeah.
that. But yeah,
And
like I mean, there's so many examples in the book, and yeah,
about how we don't see it, but we exist in it on an everyday basis.
yes,
There's also another thing that we don't talk about, which literally feeds into Christian supremacy, which is white supremacy. In 2017, when Donald Trump went into the presidency in America, the right wings and the evangelical churches again gained prominent power, because we do know that they were the main donors for Trump's campaign. And then once Trump was reelected as the president, one of their first mandates that they did was the Mexico gag order.
So yeah, the Mexico City policy, or as most people know it as the global gag rule, started in the 1980s through the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and it's basically a policy that says that no U.S. foreign aid funds can be used to support, to promote, or to perform abortion services. But what happened and so with every Republican president since Ronald Reagan, they would put in the policy, and every Democratic president would rescind it. And it's this back and forth every single term, depending on which party wins. But what happened in 2017 when Donald Trump became president is that he not only reinstated the gag rule, he then extended it to money that affects PEPFAR as well.
Yeah.
PEPFAR stands for the Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. And so it's really around HIV prevention and response, and that started in 2003. And what was happening is that the Trump presidency 1.0 basically extended the Mexico City policy and said that organizations can't even use money they get from other funders, not US money.
Yeah.
So money you get from other people, you can't use it to perform, promote, or refer people for abortion.
Yeah.
And that devastates. What it does in the public health system, as we're seeing now with everything that they're talking about now with the aid cuts, it devastates the public health systems in many global south countries, as you're saying. But when we think about the origins of the Mexico City policy, it was again the moral majority when evangelicals in the US started taking abortion as an evangelical issue, which was never really an evangelical issue.
You do talk about it in the book, honey.
Yeah. And it becomes this big evangelical political issue that that Reagan and then Republican presidents after him really use as part of their political bargaining for power.
Yeah.
And it affects us, directly. We have anti-abortion movements happening in South Africa. We have one of the most liberal abortion laws in the world, but we find ourselves with what we call crisis pregnancy centers, which are these anti-abortion NGOs that masquerade as places where you can go to get counseling if you find yourself pregnant. But they lie, they use inaccurate fetal models. I went undercover at one in Pretoria,
talk about it extensively
because I wanted to see it firsthand. I didn't want, and no one was willing to talk to me about it. And so you see all of this stuff, and they're operating here. I went through like documents that are found on US like tax documents of these organizations sending money to South Africa, on their Facebook pages and on their websites and on their newsletters, pictures of them coming to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia on trips to train local people on how to do this anti-abortion work, like it's being done in the US. The conferences have been hosted at universities and where this work is being promoted. And this is why besides my personal story, this is why I wrote this book, to say we are in trouble. It's not just about people's personal relationships with faith. It is about them trying to influence policies. It's about them trying to marginalize already marginalized people.
Even further.
It is anti-queer, it's anti-women, it's homophobic, it's
anti-sex work.
It's anti-sex work, it's it's a lot, and I can't say everything. And we want all the Oluchi be
we call them strays.
Strays.
Yeah.
All the strays to go find their way into a bookstore and read this book. But it's really about talking about this personal stuff that we spend a lot of time with.
Yeah.
And I love talking about the personal stuff as well, because in the book, what I do is then I connected to the bigger policy things to say that when you're in some of these churches, when you are in some of these things, you are co-signing or working against our constitutional rights to sexual reproductive health. Yeah.
And then I just wanted to close this off with religious trauma counseling.
Yes, religious trauma syndrome. And yeah, even though, you know, I always say I don't have a real church cult story, I think there are people who are harmed even in more devastating ways than I was harmed. I think
Omodoso and his people.
I would think I was
allegedly, because the guy got acquitted.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be sued by the church.
There's horrendous things that are happening out there on people, but also realizing that what I was going through was religious trauma, and of course in the context of all my mental health issues as well. Understanding how it wasn't my fault, and learning and unlearning the ways in which religious trauma, I was operating in the world even when I had left the church through religious trauma, and how it was control. There was coercion,
abuse,
there was abuse,
manipulation.
there was manipulation, you know, like all those things did exist. And even though I was not sexually harmed, or
I didn't think you were going to get sexually harmed, because you were quick with the emails, honey, quick with the reporting, quick with everything. I was like, hello, the queen's going to survive.
Yeah, so, you know, but horrible things are happening to people. And
even just like time, I just felt like I would have been traumatized by the amount of time I had to spend in the church. Out, like literally for me, I was like, that's just too much time.
Yeah, but it's part of the control. And so also then, like, going through this counseling, this religious trauma counseling, and learning to know what is being trauma informed, like what are the trauma informed decisions that I've taken, and what are the things that I'm learning that stuff to be able to live a free life was really something. And I did religious trauma, like I did it quite late into my deconstruction. It's not something I started with, because it's as I was reading a lot of books on cults in the US and fundamental Christians in the US, where I found out about these online groups and all of that. And I was usually the only Black person, or even the only African person in them. And so this book also became a way of me addressing the trauma to myself. Because there's not a lot of spaces that are South African that are Black, where religious trauma is talked about in it.
I didn't even know it was something that exists. You speak about it in the same tone that someone with post-traumatic disorder would speak about. Like literally it's the same thing, because you move from a traumatic incident and now you're out, and obviously you have to be healed because it was a lot.
So it is a PTSD like obviously happening within religious setting, but it was I'm so grateful I got to do some sessions and really free myself.
I'm glad you did, because we have this wonderful book over here. And what's the last thing you want to say to the masses?
Wow. So I think what I want to say is that our personal, private, spiritual journeys are interlinked with the public life, right? And it is imperative, especially now as we're seeing a resurgence of Christian ideology, as we're seeing a lot of, I would say, younger people go back to church, for us to be more critical, for us to consider what is happening, the regression in rights, in discourse around gender, around race, is not happening in a vacuum, right? And we need to be able to contextualize it within the history of what is happening in the faith spaces around us, especially Christianity, and really call them out and not be uncritical in our belief systems.
That is so nice. Honey, where can we get this wonderful book? I got mine at Exclusive Books at the Mall of Africa.
Okay. Yeah, so you can get it online. It's there on the blue. I think the girlies call it the blue app, right?
Yes.
Yes, the blue app. Take a lot. You can get it on Take a Lot. You can get it. You can go into any bookstore and ask them for the book, and they will order it for you. So that's the nice thing about bookstores.
Bargain Books.
Bargain Books also has it.
Books.
I don't think Books has it.
When I was Googling, it said it was there. And I was like, okay, it makes sense because it's a Christian bookstore.
I'm yet to see it in a Kum Books. I would love to see my book in Kum. I would really, really love to see it. Yeah. But yeah, like you can
Book
get it
Circle.
online.
It should be on Book Circle
as
well.
Book Circle. Like you can find it anyway. If you just Google it, if you find me online, the link in my bio is a link to the book. So yeah. Thank you so much.
This is a great book, guys. I'm not even going to lie. This is a great book. I was gagged the whole time I was reading. I was like, I'm dumb as hell. Why didn't I think about these things? I need to do better as a human being. Otherwise, Pontsho, thank you so much, Queen, for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sharing your story.
This was lovely.
I love smart Black women. And keep writing, keep inspiring us, and keep doing the work that you do.
Thank you so much. And keep growing this
channel. I'm taking over my as the number one podcast in South Africa, honey. I have no choice because these conversations are important. I know we're waiting, but it's happening.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, girl. With that said, we have no further information to give to the masses. Do comment, do subscribe, and do tell your friends. We'll see you guys next week for a hot topic. Otherwise, see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.